welcome back to another edition of the Smoke and Mirrors Radio Hour. I'm Jay Weidner. I wanted to remind you all that my new film, Infinity, The Ultimate Trip, Journey Beyond Death, is now opening all across the United States, and it'll be in various places. You can go to sacredmysteries.com to find out all about that. And it's a great film. It's about life after death, and is a very optimistic view of it. Also, I want to remind everyone that I have a sequel to my article, How Stanley Kubrick Faked the Apollo Moon Landings, coming out in about 3 days. It's called Secrets of the Shining, in which I deconstruct Stanley Kubrick's movie, The Shining, and show that it is actually talking about the moon and the Apollo landings and how he faked them and the horror and the terror that he went through to do it. Very interesting, and I think it's going to be quite controversial when it comes out, hopefully within the next couple days. Anyway, tonight I have John Jay Harper on our show, Smoke and Mirrors Radio Hour. It's heard every Monday through Friday here on the Global Star Radio satellite, 6 to 7 Pacific. John lives in the City of the Sun, which is, of course, Spokane, Washington, one of my favorite towns. And I always wondered why everybody who's on the edge of this kind of research, or almost everybody, lives in Washington State. It's a very odd thing. I, until about 8 months ago, lived in Washington State pretty much for years. And Cliff High, of course, comes from Washington State, and Laura Lee from the old Laura Lee Show lives in Washington State, and so does John Jay Harper. John is the author of the book Transformers, Shamans of the 21st Century, a great book. And John's interested in a lot of the same things that I'm interested in, which is why I wanted him on the air. How are you, John?
Fine, Jay. Great to be with you.
Yeah. You used to be on the Laura Lee Show, didn't you?
Yes, about 15 years ago I got my start. Yeah.
I remember that, yeah. That's where I was on her show about once a month back in the old days, but she's long gone now.
Well, you know, I haven't talked with Laura in about a decade, but I'm glad you brought her name up, because I need to give her the credit for, bringing me to the radio waves initially. And I did her show many, many times myself, and what a phenomenal individual to bring all of us together now.
Yeah, she was, and she really deserves a lot of kudos, and she's just disappeared. She lives, I hear, out by the coast now and in Washington, and has pretty much become a recluse, which is sad because she really did a lot of good work. In fact, a lot of the radio shows that are out right now, including Coast to Coast, are sort of based on her format that she had all those years ago in Seattle.
I agree, completely, and I remember her husband, Paul, was very instrumental in the technical end of that then, too.
Yeah, that's right. He was the guy, the engineer and everything, ran the business. He was a great guy. Yeah, he had a lot of fun with Paul.
Yeah, I remember sitting around the table. You bring back memories of days of Dick Hoagland and Greg Braden and so on and so forth, and I'm sure we probably crossed paths at some point there many years ago as well, and probably didn't even know who we were dealing with at the time.
Probably not. Yeah. I was. Richard Hoagland used to come up to Seattle. I brought him there about 3 times. I think I brought Braden there once too. Mm-hmm. And those were the good old days. But now all these people are big hotshots, and not the people they were then. But they're still nice people. And you're still here. And I can hardly believe you've got 8 grandchildren. You must have got married at a young age.
I
so
did.
Tell me
Thank
about.
You.
Yeah. Well. So tell me about your work. Tell me, I know about Transformers, but what else do you do?
Well, what I did, Jay, for a lot of years was I was a computer scientist, electronics engineer for the Department of Defense. I was pretty much involved in the space and missile command business for about 20 years, and lived all over the United States, worked primarily Naval Weapons Center, California, U.S. Army Missile Command, Alabama, but other areas as well in the Seattle area with the Navy. So my background primarily was information theory systems, software engineering, those types of activities. And as you know from my story, my life changed dramatically in 1988 when I saw a supposedly dead colleague, a physicist friend of mine, George Begay, who I had worked with for about 17 years, suddenly came to me one morning and changed my life, because I went from a left-brain scientist who really had no interest in anything metaphysical to being confronted with a conundrum. I could not understand how a left-brain person, logical, science-based, could see somebody in front of me at 4 a.m. in a June morning in 1988 who I had buried 6 months previous from a massive heart attack at age 40 in Huntsville, Alabama. So, I was shocked into this whole genre of metaphysical topics, and that's where I got my start. I started a voracious reading program on near-death experience. There wasn't a lot out then. This was in 1988, but I grew with the field, with Dr. Ken Ring's work and Ray Moody, etc., and that's what got me into this loop, Jay.
If I'd known that, I would have had you in my movie Infinity, which is the new film I have coming out, which is about life after death, and probably I'll send you a copy. You can tell me what you think.
Very good.
Yeah, so you had this experience where you saw someone who was dead, and I guess what you could almost really call a mystical experience, or that aha moment that there's something going on here that you had not noticed before.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, what I started to do was I questioned, the whole premise of Newtonian physics initially. I mean, I started looking at things a lot differently: time, space, matter, energy, the coordinate systems, you might say, of basic science. And I realized that, folks who had, through the centuries, had talked about seeing multidimensionally, whether that's aliens or angels or something in between, had probably something similar going on in their brain chemistry that I did at that time. But of course, this is you're right. It's a shock. It's an aha. It's a eureka moment. It's also a crisis point for the individual. I went into a real deep sense of chaos. I questioned everything that I'd been taught, of course, in the academic community. I wondered if this is really real, what does it really mean? And, over time I realized that we were talking about some of the brain substructures like the pineal gland and the amygdala. These are brain structures that have to do with feelings and also opening our third eye or pineal gland. So I started looking at biochemistry, and what I surmised over the years, Jay, was that we're dealing with things like dimethyltryptamine, the same types of compounds that you find in hallucinogenic substances. And, of course, that led me to Terence McKenna, and then later to works like John Major Jenkins with the shamans and the Maya and Egyptian civilization. So, that's a quick summary, but, I've dealt with folks like Rick Strassman, the psychiatrist who wrote that wonderful book, DMT, the Spirit Molecule. And so I'm kind of coming full circle now, trying to integrate physics and metaphysics. And so that's kind of a quick overview of where I'm at now. I'm really looking now again at brain structures and trying to understand how the larger vision of reality that we're confronted with, earth changes, we're also looking at things now, sacred geometry. We're looking at the ancient sacred structures around the world. I've looked at, not only the pyramids, but, things that are going on in the UFO ET contact community. But all of these things somehow are part of this larger picture that I've painted for myself. And so I'm constantly just recycling through everyone's information, their database, so to speak, online. And then also I do talk with some folks that, are on the cutting edge of this type of research.